Thanks everybody for coming tonight. We appreciate it. We just are here to talk about the Main Street Reconstruction project and want to let you know what we've done since a year ago when we were here. Tonight I have with me Todd Matheson as our project supervisor. My name is Vicki Romanesco. I'm the project manager. Jeremy White is our lead design engineer. And from the Wisconsin Historical Society, Peggy Verhagen, and Emily Pettis is our cultural resources manager. And then also Ernie Peterson is here tonight. He'll be around to answer questions about any real estate acquisition that you might have. When the DOT chooses to do a project, we look at purpose and need. And we believe that there is a large need for a reconstruction project in Lake Mills. The last time the pavement was reconstructed was in 1962. So the pavement is crumbling, the utilities are failing, you have poor drainage, and right now the city is spending a great deal of money on maintenance that with a new pavement structure, this amount of money could be reduced. So the purpose of the project is to provide a new concrete pavement from south of Topol Street to Madison Street. We'll have new sidewalks and new curb and gutter that will be 100% funded with state and federal dollars. No properties will be assessed for any of the sidewalk or curb and gutter. We'll also install new storm sewer to improve the drainage, and the city will be installing new sanitary sewer and a new water main. And Jeremy here is going to talk about some of the details of what's been decided since we were here last year.
All right. At the last PIM, we identified an issue with kind of the downtown parking area. There we felt there was a little bit of an issue, the existing parking with coming in, and essentially there's a bit of a weaving movement. Traffic coming here and coming this way. We have traffic turning right and then other traffic coming from the parking area right next to the businesses, a little triangle area off the street, off the highway I should say, coming through. We presented about 4 alternatives to the city to consider for modifying and changing that downtown parking area. When the city came back, they held some meetings, brought up the council meetings. What they came back was basically what we had as our alternative number 3, as you can see up here, what we have here. Essentially they'll be closing off kind of the widened area up near Lake Street. We'll be putting in the widened curb section in the middle. We're going to change instead of you when you're pulling out of that side parking area, instead of having to look trying to behind and over your shoulder, you're instead going to be pulling in almost at a right angle to the existing highway to actually pull out, much like a normal intersection. Another issue was discussed at the first PIM was parking in the residential area from Veterans Lane south down to Topol Street. Initially, we had showed parking on the west side of the roadway. People obviously had some concerns about that, and we had questions on whether we needed it on that side, whether it was more prudent to have it on the east side of the street or no parking at all. We brought that back to the city. The city went through and had a survey sent out to the residents on the actual 89 South Main Street here, took back those results and comments from the people. Their decision back then was to put the parking for the residential area on the east side. One of the big things we're here now that's new for this meeting here is construction staging and sequencing. We're getting into how we're going to plan to build this reconstruction project. It's going to be a big project. It's going to be a lot of work. We've kind of broken it down into 4 main work stages or construction areas. The stages won't be completely sequential, as in stage 1 complete and then start stage 2. They're going to be overlapping quite a bit. So it's going to be kind of a rolling operation. The main goal is to basically follow the way the utilities are, and that's going to be the driving force behind the different stages. The first stage we have, which you can see up on the larger display here, feel free to come up afterwards, and on the table over there, is basically from the downtown area, from Madison Street down to Veterans Lane. We're looking to start this project in March, early spring here, and we should have it done middle of summer towards the beginning of July. Then also we're looking to, next stage we're looking at was from south of Veterans Lane down to just north of East Lake Park Place. This stage is going to have some deep sewer excavations. It's going to take a little longer, but we're looking to start that in April and complete that by the end of August. And by complete road, we mean pavement up, curb and gutter, sidewalk, and driveways up, and finishing up so you'll be able to drive on it. The third stage we have is from East Lake Park Place, that intersection, down past south of Woodland Beach Road. That stage was kind of identified for the 2 high schools that are along that stretch and for getting students in and out. It works out somewhat well that we can be able to start that in June, right after school's getting out, and we have enough time to get it done by September 1st. So it should be up and running in pavement and mostly complete by the time school's up and running. So there shouldn't be too many impacts there for school when it starts up in the fall of 2018. The last stage is then from Woodland Beach Road down through Topol Street. This portion we're looking to start here in July, and we'll probably go up through into November. So overall, the project's going to basically start in March and go through November, but it's not going to be the entire road at the whole time. Another issue that was brought up at the last public information meeting was concerns of during construction, what about the businesses downtown? There were issues with, and stories from, I think the village of Cambridge, and the construction project went through there, and it was not very good to the businesses. One of the procedures we've actually had success with was, for example, here on the slide, this is a front street in the city of Beaver Dam. This was just constructed this past summer. This was a full reconstruct, replacing all the utilities and storm sewer and sanitary downtown, very similar to what's going to happen here in Lake Mills. What we had the contractor do is basically set up and create fencing like you have here with the frames and the wood frames, and they're anchored in to the ground beneath. Basically, we end up taking half the sidewalk. Beaver Dam had very wide 12, 13-foot sidewalks, similar to what you have down here at Lake Mills. Half the sidewalk was taken out to be built with the roadway in the middle there, and then the rest, you had the fence up, and that was kind of the pedestrian zone. That was kind of the safe area. We received a lot of positive feedback from both people, or both businesses and the people, that it really helped to define that they were allowed to go downtown, and that they know where, here's the work area and here's where I'm allowed to be. They didn't have the drop-offs, they didn't have equipment running right next to them and have sidewalks here. And then once what will happen is, for the downtown, is the sidewalk will be constructed that's next to the road, and then we'll flip-flop and then be doing the sidewalks that are right next to the business. And we'll be coordinating with the businesses on how to do, obviously, the concrete pours right in front of their specific doorways. It'll be tricky, but we'll just need to coordinate with each business on when they have available. At the last meeting, we also presented our detour route for the project. This is a reconstruction. The project will be closed to through traffic. By through traffic, we mean traffic such as maybe semi-trailers or other passengers maybe heading down from the south, heading north up to Waterloo or vice versa, and just having through the project. It's a little light here, but basically the project starts down at the south end here, where Highway 89 meets up with US 18. Then it would follow US 18 to Wisconsin 26, and then up to I-94, and then I-94 back up here to Lake Mills exit to continue north and or come in from the south. One of the comments that came up from the last public information meeting was to possibly extend CP Avenue. It's a local city street here down to Highway 89. The city did investigate this. The city brought forward with WSDOT upper management and also involved the local lawmaker as well to discuss whether or not this can be funded as part of the state transportation funds. Through those meetings, it was determined that extending out the CP Avenue was not eligible for the state transportation funds. So for right now, we're going to have this official detour signed up, but for traffic that's trying to get into the city of Lake Mills specifically, the city is proposing now here for a bit of a local detour, basically to direct people in and around the construction site as it's being built through here. So obviously homeowners will be able to get into their homes here through it, but it's going to be in the construction area. You can see in the orange area is going to be gravel and kind of tore up and not very nice, and you're not going to want the people coming in to businesses or festivals or events to go through there. The idea is to come in from the south between Topol Street and Pinnacle Drive. It's kind of a bottleneck. We're planning to put in some temporary paved lanes between there up to Pinnacle Drive. Then from Pinnacle Drive up to East Lake Park Place, and then further up through Grove Street, and then up to Lake Street and up to Madison Street to get around. That'll be a signed detour for locals to get in and around and access some of the side streets at the various times while the road's being constructed going south. One of the new things is this staging concept. This is again from Pinnacle Drive down to Topol Street. That's with this local detour. So we're looking at kind of having to do this in 4 little mini setups or stages here. For the first stage, for a 4A, we're going to swap traffic, push them over to the west side. We're going to need to construct some temporary lanes, and we'll have to go and borrow some right-of-way on the east side. The second part, we're going to swap traffic over to the recently completed temporary lanes. Then we're going to be putting in the utilities and building the new roadway on the west side and building that up. Once that's complete, then we're going to go move traffic again back to the west side onto the newly completed lanes and tear out the temporary pavement lanes and finish the east side of the roadway. There will be access for people to get onto Columbus Street and Sandy Beach Road and for businesses through there. They'll be able to cut through. It may be moving around at times, but we're going to be committed to maintaining access to get through those businesses between Pinnacle and Topol. Another issue that came up at the PIM and has been very interested for a lot of the people in the community is the trees, specifically in the terrace. We have been working with the city. We have received all the comments that you have given to us. The decision still has been made. We're looking at that we're not going to salvage the trees that are in the terrace. That's, or the tree lawn, and as the city refers to it, basically between the back of curb and the sidewalk. The reasoning behind that is part of the new roadway will be widened out. It's currently 40 feet, and it's now, the new highway is going to be 43 feet wide. The new concrete pavement, when we're putting this in with the means and methods that we use to pour in the concrete curb and pavement, we need 2 feet of excavation behind the back of curb and aggregate and gravel behind there to be able to support the machinery as they're paving this through, which intrudes into the areas where the terraces be as well. We also have issues too where some trees are planted really close either to the back of curbs or in the picture here, right up next to the sidewalk. With having to put the sidewalks back in, we're going to be probably damaging the trees, specifically right down right there, in order to fit this tree in, fit the sidewalk in. So the city's said to have those trees to take them down instead of trying to salvage them and have them possibly die a year or two later, and the city has to take care of it. The plan currently right now is for WISDOT to reimburse the city $500 for each tree to be removed for construction in the terrace area. And then the city is going to take that money, and the goal is to plant trees back in the, behind the sidewalk in the yards of the homeowners there. Supervisor, I want to talk a little bit about, in general, some of the funding for the region and how that works with this project. It's related.
Thanks, Jeremy, and just want to take about 4 minutes here to talk about a few things, and being the area supervisor for DOT, I want to kind of show how this project fits into the big picture. I know we are probably up here 20 minutes right now, and we'll have a lot of questions and answers afterwards, and we'll be focusing probably on the project impacts, which is a good thing. But a lot of those impacts are negative things to the project, but we want to take a few minutes to talk about the positives, what the project does, how it will benefit the community. Highway funding is segregated, and the legislature segregates those highway funds for roadway construction, and it's really segregated into different pots of money. We call them buckets at times or at DOT. And there's 3 main buckets. One is the major projects, projects like I-39 between Madison and the state line. That's a major project. Verona Road is a major project. Those projects are actually enumerated project by project. So it's a big dollar amount, and it's a specific project, and it's a specific allocation into this majors program. The second, so that's kind of the big projects. The other second bucket is what's called our backbone, which kind of makes sense. Those are interstate highways, kind of like 4-lane highways. And then the third is called our 3R. We call it 3R. It's a weird name, but it stands for resurfacing, reconstruction, and recondition. So those 3 R's, reading, writing, but it's 3 R's, and that's what that stands for, and that's where this project falls into on Highway 89. 3R is really those 2-digit state, 2-lane, 2-digit state line, state highways. There's a few 3 digits out there. They're usually smaller. But in our southwest region, the state is divided up into 5 regions. There's 16 counties in the southwest region. In that southwest region, we have almost 9,000 lane miles of state highway that the DOT is responsible for. Highway 89, this project is 2.5 miles of 9,000, okay? In our 3R pot, we get 62 million and a little bit more than $62 million a year. 62 million seems like a lot of money, right? But that's got to go to 9,000 lane miles of highway, okay? And that's got to get divided up. The Lake Mills project represents 0.028% of the highway of that 9,000 miles. Right now, the project estimate is $5.2 million of DOT funds. That represents 8% of that $62 million allocation. So if you are good at math, 8% of 0.026, that's a pretty disproportional funding. Granted, we haven't been around since 1962, but if you're on the math, it's a long time before we'll come back, before we've been here, before we're coming back at our current funding. I don't want to have this discussion be about highway funding. We'll be here all night. But just to kind of give you a scope, that 8% is a huge amount. And that money has to be divided up amongst not only communities like Beloit, Platteville, Prairie du Chien, Onalaska, La Crosse, Waupun, all those communities in between in that 16-county area. That 3R money, any of those communities that have a state highway going through them, that money has to be divided up between those communities. But not only those communities, but the state highways that run between those communities. So Highway 89 between here and Waterloo, that's one. Highway 134 between Cambridge that runs to nowhere, right? That's another one that's somewhat local. But then there's also highways up north. 33, for example, that runs from Beaver Dam to Horicon. Up by La Crosse, Highway 35 that runs along the river. There's all kinds of that. 9,000 miles covers a lot of ground. Tonight, we're really here to take what I consider, it's kind of like if you put a football analogy to it, from the design process, we're probably at about the 50-yard line. We got this project a year ago, we were maybe on the 20-yard line. We've carried it now to the 50-yard line. Jeremy's got to get this thing another 50 yards to get the plans done. We don't have our environmental document done. That's coming up in spring of 2016. Acquisition of right-of-way will be happening in 2017. Final design complete will be August of 2017. Hopefully that's where that goal line is, hopefully. Construction would be in 2018. And tonight, really, we're out here kind of taking the temperature of the community to see where we're at. And I think the outcome of tonight's meeting is kind of important. If this project is not well received and doesn't fit in with the community values, then the DOT will go back and meet with local officials and kind of decide if this is the right course of action, if we're on the right track or not. So really tonight we're here to listen and show you what we have thus far, listen, and still we have 50 more yards to make some adjustments, but that's where we're kind of at today. So a big part of tonight is a historic district, so we're going to switch over and have those folks come up. Do you want to introduce? Vicki, do you want to introduce the folks that are coming up?
Sure, Emily and Peggy.
I don't know if we have an intro or what.
Introduce myself. Emily's a historic expert that's been helping. Oh, yeah. Emily is a historic expert, and she's our consultant that we're turning to figure out. It's part of the environmental process to determine if any adverse effects are happening in the historic regions. I'll let you talk.
Okay, thank you. So as part of the environmental process for this project, cultural resource surveys were completed along the corridor. And we identified 2 individual properties that were eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Those are the Chicago and Northwestern Depot and the Everson Farmstead, which is located at the southern termini of the project corridor. We also identified 2 potential historic districts. We have the Downtown Commercial Historic District and the South Main Street Residential Historic District, which you can see in the slide here. We also have a map up, and I do have a couple handouts. If anybody would like to take one, just let me know after the presentation. So we've been working with WSDOT, and we've been able to minimize project impacts adjacent to the 2 individual properties and in the downtown commercial district area. But we will have an adverse effect in the residential district because of the tree removal that Jeremy has already talked about. So now we are working with DOT and the State Historic Preservation Office to try to identify measures to mitigate those impacts within the historic district. One of those things that we're looking at right now is the National Register nomination for the residential district. And Peggy Berrigan will come up. She is the National Register Coordinator for the State Historic Preservation Office. She can talk a little bit about the process of listing a historic district and then what it means to the property owners within that district.
All right, I need to find my presentation.
Yours is the next one, sir, right up here. So you can just go, next one.
Okay,
So here's your stuff, and then that's what's.
okay, where do I,
You just hit.
oh, there we go, okay.
Back, so this will be back. It's forward. That's the forward.
Forward. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Peggy Berrigan. I'm the National Register Coordinator at the Wisconsin Historical Society. And I'm here just to tell you a little bit about what the National Register is and what it means. This is just an overview. So I want to give you, broad information, and then there's always time for questions later if you have questions. So starting with the National Register, what is it? The National Register is a program of the National Park Service, and it's simply a list. It's a list of properties that are significant in the United States, and they can be significant for history, for association with a person, for architecture, or for information potential, so archaeology. Again, so we identify properties that are eligible for the National Register under these 4 criteria. I'm going to talk a little bit about historic districts. We do list properties individually on the National Register, but since a district has been identified here, I just wanted to focus more attention on what a historic district is. And it's a collection of buildings. It's an area that's been identified where a collection of buildings really provides a sense of place in a community. There are all kinds of different types of historic districts. I mean, there are industrial districts and there are archaeological districts. This one here is a downtown historic district. This is an example of a residential district. This one is in Madison. It's sort of large. Historic districts can be very small. We just listed a few districts with less than 10 properties in them, or they can be quite large. One of our newest districts in Madison has almost 900 properties in it, so there's a wide range. But there is a lot of misinformation about the National Register, what it is and what it means as a property owner to be listed in the National Register. So I'm going to just go through some of these most asked questions about listing in the National Register. So if my property is listed, I must open it to the public. and that is false. Private property is private property. You don't have to open it to the public. If my property is listed, I can paint my house any color I want to. And that's true. The National Register doesn't regulate paint color. Actually, the National Register doesn't, for private property owners, it doesn't really regulate much at all. It's a primarily honorific program, and there are no restrictions to private property owners if your property is listed in the National Register. Well, if I'm listed in the National Register, I can't ever change anything, and that's false. Again, no restrictions to private property owners using private money. So you can make changes to your building. You can remodel, you can build an addition, you can make upgrades, you can do whatever you want to your building. Anything over 50 years old is eligible for the state and national register, and that's false. Listing in the National Register, you need to meet criteria for listing, and those include having significance and having integrity. And so that means that the building is not just maybe architecturally important, but that it retains its historic appearance. It hasn't been changed from its historic period. As I've already mentioned, the National Register is primarily honorific, and so there are no restrictions to private property owners, and I get asked this all the time, why should I bother? And people have different reasons why they want to be listed in the National Register, but it often comes down to the fact that people love their historic houses or their historic main streets. They love their community. The historic community provides that sense of place, that feeling that this place is unique and unlike any other community. You get that sense because of the historic resources. They can't be duplicated. And so being listed in the National Register acknowledges that unique character in your community. But communities also use it for heritage tourism and to promote their community. The other benefit to listing in the National Register is that property owners can take advantage of rehabilitation tax credits. These credits are available to property owners to make upgrades and repairs. This is an historic preservation incentive, and so this isn't a I can do whatever I want with my building tax credit. This is a preservation tax credit. As a tax credit, it's also considered public money, and so with public money, my office does review the project to ensure that the work is appropriate for an historic building. There are tax credits for residential properties and income-producing properties, so there's two different programs. Income-producing properties, there's an up to 40% tax credit on eligible expenses. For residential properties, it's a 25% credit. Oh, I'm missing a slide. No, it's, no, that's okay. I was just going to give you some more information about work that's eligible for tax credits, but it's basically any kind of repair. If you're going to replace your roof, wood repair, repointing your masonry, structural repairs, updating mechanical equipment. I mean, all those things that you do to update or take care of your house, those are all things that are eligible for the tax credit. So when people are considering that these are projects they're going to spend money on anyway, and they say, well, if we submit your project to my office and get it approved, you can get 25% credit for that work, you know, it's a pretty easy sell. The National Register in Wisconsin has been around since 1966. Statewide, we have quite a number of historic resources. And even here in Lake Mills, You may recognize these buildings. These are both listed in the National Register of Historic Places. I want to tell people that there's also confusion about the National Register versus local landmark designation. Local landmark designation happens through local ordinance. The National Register program happens through the State Historic Preservation Office, which we administer the program, and this is under state and federal law. And just briefly, the typical process for identifying properties for eligibility can be identification in the community through a survey or a road project in this case. Properties are identified in the community as eligible. Once they're identified, a nomination is written for those properties. The property nomination is then forwarded to our Historic Preservation Review Board. We have a state review board that reviews all of our nominations. They meet quarterly, and they must approve all of our nominations. Once they approve a nomination, the property is listed in the State Register of Historic Places. And then from that point, we advance the nomination to the Park Service, and the Park Service will then consider the building for the National Register. And then once the Park Service agrees to list the property, they notify our office, we notify the property owner that the property is now listed in the National Register. There's a lot of information about the National Register and work to historic buildings. I just wanted to bring your attention to the Wisconsin Historical Society's website because it's a really nice resource for doing research. You can, in that white text box, you can type in your address and hit enter and see if there's information about your property. Maybe we have a historic photograph. You can also click on this box in the bottom corner, the green box that says preserve your homes and properties. And if you do that, then you're brought to this page where you can search our databases of National Register properties. And the tax credit program is here. There's also a page about basic information for how to care for your historic building. We have hundreds of articles covering all kinds of topics that give you guidance for appropriate work to historic buildings. This is a phenomenal resource on our website. And this website's fairly new, so I just wanted to bring it to people's attention that this information is there and it's available for you. There's also more information about the tax credit program. So all of those resources are available for more information. I just wanted to be sure to provide my contact information. I also have business cards on the tables with the sign-in sheets. If you want to grab one of my business cards, if you have questions, please call me at any time. I'm happy to answer your questions about the National Register. And Jen Daigle is the preservation architect you'd be talking to about tax credits. So if the district goes through and your building is contributing to the historic district, you can take advantage of the tax credits. And I think we're going to wait for questions.
We're almost ready for questions. I just want, thank you very much. We are going to open it up to questions. I also want to make sure that everybody knows how important it is for us to get your comments, whether you're for the project or against the project, or if you have something specific. There's comment sheets in the back. You can talk to any of us, give us your name. You can send emails. Just want you to know that we're here right now to listen to your input. So, any questions? Yes?
So with regard to the trees coming out down the street, are you taking out any trees that are not, like, between the sidewalk and the houses? Are you intending to pull any of those out as well? Because I do believe there's a number of trees that aren't just in the tree line.
That's correct. She asked if we're taking any trees out that are between the sidewalk and the houses, and we are mostly not. I think there might be 2 or 3.
That'll be done with the real estate negotiations between the property owner and the state here.
We, what could happen to some of those trees that are really close is that it's the property owner's decision. We will be cutting into those roots. If you choose to try to keep your tree and hope that it survives, then you can do that, and it will be in the negotiation, or we can reimburse you for a new tree. In your second part?
Part B was, have you had any communities that decided not to have, or that decided right not to have all the trees taken down?
Well, there is, yes, when we have overwhelming people that say, we don't want you to do this to our community, then we take a step backwards. And what we need to do then is we would change this project to a full reconstruct into a mill and overlay. So what that would mean that we stay exactly within the pavement right now. We mill off the top 4-6 inches of the bad pavement, and we come in and repave. So this helps to salvage your trees. What it doesn't do is let you change any of your utilities, your sanitary, your water, or the drainage in your roadway. Excuse me. And the sidewalks would not be touched either with the mill and overlay. Thank you. More questions?
The new trees will not be planted in the terrace. They'll be on the other side of the sidewalk.
I believe that is mostly correct. Is that, Steve, when the trees, is that the city's decision to put the trees in the yards instead of in the terrace?
City policy doesn't allow us to put trees back into a terrace less than 6 feet wide. So our proposal is to plant them behind the sidewalk, because the trees as they grow and expand, they push the sidewalk and the curb up, and they relatively shortly destroy the public infrastructure that's in. So we want to make it last as long as possible. We also want the trees to last a lot longer without having to be removed every time we have to do a reconstruction project. So the goal is to get trees in that can last a lot longer and not be affected by the public infrastructure.
About that then, because then you say that 3 feet is not, or how many? 4.5 feet is not wide enough. So basically you have to move how many feet into the middle of your yard for the tree? If you keep it away from the sidewalk so it won't hurt the sidewalk.
We propose on taking a 15-foot easement, and then you work with the arborist, Rob or Brandon, to determine where the best spot to plant the tree in the yard would be.
So basically we're taking away the whole shady part of South Main Street.
We are removing all the trees from the tree lawn and trying to create a shade area that starts on the outside edge of the sidewalk.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. Weren't we once designated a tree city? We still are? We are? Are the signs still up?
Yes.
Okay.
So as far as the utilities improvement, so the storm sewer, I assume, the sanitary, and then the water main, right, is going to be replaced, not electric?
The electric utility will, Steve, you want to take this one?
And gas, I guess? Well, I had another, I mean, the other question is that the homeowners, will they have to incur costs associated with upgrading or just tying into the new infrastructure?
The new water and sewer are no. What about the electric?
The electric will be, all the electric will be underground in the backyards. And if you want to hook up underground and your overhead now, we'll help you with that. If you don't want to go overhead or go underground, you can stay overhead. So it'll be a negotiation process with every individual.
Stormwater is not generally hooked up to private properties. We have had projects where if you have a sump pump issue, we are willing to provide a sump pump connection to the storm sewer, where we bring it to the property line and then you can hook up to it. If that's something you would let us know.
And I think we had talked about this the last meeting, that I've got a lead pipe coming in for my water, and you said probably got to get rid of that. So
We are under a lead and copper consent order from the DNR. We will be replacing our part. We have to give you a certain amount of notice to say you can, or you have the option to replace it. You have to replace it, and you have the option, but we have to give you 60 days notice that we're replacing our portion and that you can replace your part of that. It is 45. You are recommended to replace it because it is lead and it contributes to certain health problems, but we do not require it.
thanks.
Diane?
May I come up?
Sure.
My name is Diane Fritsch. I'm on the City Council here in Lake Mills. I think there's a piece of this puzzle that is kind of missing. It sounded sitting in the seat there that, gee, we could do nothing and we'd all go home happy. I think you need to understand that South Main has a lot of underground necessary work that needs to be done. That's an old street, very old street. And no matter whether this project goes through or not, the city is still going to have to rip it up and fix the sewer and fix the water. Because just like you already know, some of the issues we've had downtown with the water pipes cracking, and they weren't made for that long. So whether we do the process with the state or whether we do the repair work with the city, South Main is still going to get ripped up and this stuff is going to have to get done. The difference is that if we do it with the state, they pick up the cost of the things they mentioned. The sewer, come on over, join me. What do you pick up?
The city will still pay for the sanitary sewer and the water main, but what the state is doing is we're paying for all the excavation and the refilling. When you change the sanitary sewer, you're going to break up the concrete and the existing pavement. We're going to pay for new pavement and new base course and to put everything back.
Okay, so what you need to understand is you're not going to get nothing done on South Main, and even when we dig up to do what we need to do, that also can kill the trees, because you're going to be having roots that are going around the different infrastructure in the street. So please understand that, and the other big difference is when they do what they just said they do, they pay for it. When we do it, you pay for it. And taxes will go up, just to let you know, significantly, probably over 20 years. They'll be like $130 per average home per year, every year for 20 years. I mean, this is kind of somebody saying, hey, listen, if you do it now, we'll help you pay for it. You don't have to do it now, but if you do it now, we'll help you pay for it. We can choose not to do that, but then the people in the city can't complain when their taxes go up significantly to do South Main Street. Now, that's something I feel you need to know as taxpayers, just for your information.
But how much of an impact do you think it will have on the city to destroy the whole South Main look? I get what you're saying about needing to redo things, but right now people come into the city and they say, oh, I really like the area, the historic area. You're basically getting rid of that because there'll be it'll be like the north part of Waterloo, where it's just.
Oh, it'll be like the north part of Lake Mills, from the interstate to downtown. And it'll be better than that because we're going to put in bigger trees than we did then. Correct, Steve?
We tried to save the existing trees. We removed the substantial amount, and we'll have to continue to remove a substantial amount of them because it's a substantial state of decay or decline. Diane has brought up the issue that we have discussed significantly at council is that the sanitary sewer and water main have to be replaced. Storm sewer should be replaced, and it ties into a whole group of other projects. But let's just start with the sanitary sewer. The sanitary sewer, a major portion of the street will be somewhere between 20 and 25 feet deep. You have to replace the laterals out to all the property lines. So just about every tree is going to have all its roots cut substantially anyways, and probably within.
No, I get all that, but then you can't put them back. You're not putting them back.
Not putting them back in the tree line?
You're setting the trees way back.
Right.
So you're totally destroying the whole look of the street.
But, Vicki and I talked about that, and the only way we can get them back in the tree line is to buy additional right of way. And then we can push the sidewalks back. And then we can get to the 6-foot requirement, which would, at least at a minimum, allow us the option of planting some trees. That's an option. Would the state fund that?
Funding is very tight right now. As you may have heard, projects are getting canceled and delayed because of that. So to buy a foot of right-of-way along the whole corridor would be expensive. I mean, I don't think we could fund it this year at this time.
Yeah. When we buy right-of-way, we hire appraisers and people that come out, are specialists in the real estate field, and they will come out and evaluate your property, and they will determine the value of what's being acquired for the process, for the project. Offhand, I have no idea what land values are like to make knows it all, but you've got a 2.5-mile project. Even at 1 or 2 feet for 2.5 miles, that's going to add up to a significant amount of money. Per property, maybe not so much, but it's just got a lot of properties. So I really couldn't give you an estimate of how much more it would cost, but it's not going to be, a small amount of money on 2.5 miles.
It's not a trick question, but it's I'm wondering about utilities or sewer interruptions for your homeowners or businesses during the construction. Will there be any interruptions?
Yes.
Water or sewer interruptions?
Will there be any water or sewer interruptions during construction?
Brandon Herbert with Strand, or the engineer for the city designing the sewer and water.
I'm not the use of that. Because people are listening to this at home on television, and they don't hear you if you speak over that.
I'm Brandon Herbert with Strand Associates. We're the engineer for this city. We're designing the sewer and the sanitary sewer and the water for the project. There will be some interruptions. They're always designed to be minimal, and you're always going to be informed ahead of time, days, planned. We have to give us some time frame. You can't always nail it to a 2-hour window, but we do always notify people of the shutdowns. It's usually a matter of a day to a portion of a day for an individual home. Things during construction do happen. Something might go wrong and it might be shut down unexpectedly for longer than that, but we obviously try to minimize that. For the sewer, sanitary sewer connections to the home, that would be very minimal. We would bring the new pipe up right near your existing pipe and hook them together, and it should be very short amount of time where you wouldn't be able to use that. The water, what was it? Yeah, like hours, yes. But the water main is a little bit more, the water service to the house is a little bit more, hit or miss on the exact time frame. There will be some interruptions, though.
You're being extremely optimistic.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I mean, if everything went well, that's what would happen. But let's say you have a 6-inch lead joint water main and none of the water valves in it work for blocks. You might have a lot larger water shut off for a longer period of time, depending on how the infrastructure works while we're taking it up. Water lines run through the sanitary sewer lines or manholes. How will that affect the project?
Well, the new water will be installed prior to that.
So you're gonna lay some above ground, or you're gonna lay?
We have to figure some of this stuff out. So. But sometimes I have done it actually on a project where they lay a temporary distribution system on the surface of the ground and they hook it up to each individual house. And that is an option that we could do on this project. But each individual segment of the project, you know, our time frames available to get the work done will influence the exact processes that we use.
The sanitary, the sanitary is going to come out first, and it's significantly deep, and so that's why you would put the water main as a temporary on the outside. Okay, so the sanitary should be relatively quick and easy, even though it's pretty deep.
I have a question because we live on Pinnacle and we've addressed with the police chief the speeds, you know, and people have done a good job when they see the flashing, whatever that thing is, to slow down. But I am concerned, and I was wondering what could be done to address the speeds towards, you know, as you go down Pinnacle, because I see that may be a big problem with that detour.
I think maybe the chief wants to come up here too. He may have told you that I've addressed this problem with him on several different occasions, and that I have significant concerns about what he's going to do in the area, and what's going to occur in the neighborhood, and what kind of problems we could experience. We've been trying to develop plans for how we're going to handle these issues too, because obviously I anticipate that we're going to find semi-trucks on Pinnacle trying to make that corner for a couple times. And once you get 1 or 2 trucks towed out of there by topals, I'm hoping that'll end. But traffic will be an issue, so I'll let you address that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of my concerns. First off is with the semis that Mr. Wilkie just explained. We are going to be doing some detour, put up some signage and stuff like that. And we'll be doing a lot of enforcement in the beginning to make sure that we aren't getting semi-traffic coming in through that construction area and, you know, basically getting jackknifed in there and have to get towed out of there. So that's how at first it's going to probably be, you know, with the signage and the detour routes and a little bit of education. I think most semi-drivers will get the message pretty quick, especially if we do have to, you know, I guess have somebody come in with a tow truck and pull one of those units out of there. It's going to cost them a lot of money, and they'll probably get a citation for it. Now, regarding the question on how we're going to deal with the traffic on Pinnacle, what we'll probably do is observe it, because a lot of it is going to be, I mean, it's going to be foreign to us, I guess, in the beginning until we can see what sort of issues we have with the traffic, you know, not just on 89, but, you know, some of the other thoroughfares, you know, that people are going to be taking as I guess, as an alternate route to get around Highway 89. So we'll be listening for the community, for the, you know, the public. We're going to have officers out there looking around, being very aware of the surroundings, I guess, in the beginning, to make sure that traffic is flowing properly. And if there are problems, we'll get on it and address it. But I ask that the community also help us. And if you notice, you know, speeds, a lot of issues, you know, in your neighborhood, particularly on Pinnacle or any other street, really, for that matter, let us know. Give us a call, and we'll go over. We'll send officers over, and we'll do some enforcement. See if we can get that to slow down.
Can I ask, is it possible to obtain a separate flasher? You know,
Right. I think you're talking. Oh, okay.
Specifically for that project.
You need to arrest them.
Is that possible from a funding standpoint?
You're talking about the digital speed signs that we do have there. That's something we could look at. We do have the mobile speed trailer that we could look at putting there as well. I mean, if this project is going to last for a significant amount of time, I would say that may be a good idea, but otherwise, I'm not sure if there would be a need for that after this project is done. There might be better locations for us to put something like that. You're talking about more of the permanent speed signs. Yeah, now I do have a mobile speed trailer. We can definitely move that to that particular location if we sense there's a problem, as well as other streets that we notice there may be some speeding going on, along with additional enforcement. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes people just aren't aware how fast they're really going until they see it on one of those flashing digital speed signs.
One of the things that IDOT brought up, or WISDOT brought up, was they would set barricades in kind of a
Staggered offset.
Yeah, staggered offset kind of run, so that people would have to kind of work through them, get into the street initially, so it would slow them down entering, and it probably help prevent semis from getting in. They would probably really have to pop them barricades to get a semi through there. It'll happen, but it was probably reduced. Randy?
I probably won't need a microphone. I don't think I do. Famous statesman once said, the pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, but the optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. And so, you know, the way I see this is that this is an opportunity for our community. I know the tree line is going to be destroyed. It seems like a done deal. You know what I mean? Whether they dig into to fix the sewer with just surfacing the road, or we do this whole ball of wax. It seems to me that the tree line is at risk here. If we want to help with the infrastructure, we want to keep things developed, we want to save some money on our utilities. I think that was stated before. If that happens, then there's going to be this 4.5 foot wide space. It's called terrace. And my question is, what are we going to do with that terrace? Let's find something good to do with that. I know we can't plant trees on it. Maybe we can plant something on it. Maybe we can put some really nice signage. And I know that the city and also that the project itself has some money sequestered for lighting. Some really, I'd like Steve to talk to that if he could. That isn't there some money that's set aside for bigger trees, lighting, to make the south end more inviting, a nicer place to look at. And then the other thing I'd like to talk to, just the final thing, was a group of your fellow citizens, Steve included. There were 16 of us that went to a place called Prairie du Chien last year. We wrote a report and did the first impressions. We went there specifically because they were ripping up Highway 35, their main road coming through town. We took a look at how they handled this and how the Department of Transportation handled it. And I've got to say that the main thing that we heard from them was that the Department of Transportation is a partner. They provide a team, they provide communication to deal with the issues like flashers and deal with, really work together with the police department with making sure that things are taken care of properly, with business owners to make sure that lanes to the business, that people have access. There's a myriad of issues that comes up with this, and I think I was convinced enough with Prairie du Chien's the way they handled it, the way they handled bringing people through town, the signage they used, and there were some of us that were on that team who were very impressed with the way it was handled, and we learned a few things that we didn't want to do. So what we're trying to say is that there's a whole group of people who are trying to prepare for this, if it comes, and I personally hope it does come. I live on South Main Street. I'm going to lose a couple of trees as well, but I think the trade-off for the infrastructure to get completely redone, to have millions of dollars paid for by us in taxes, but at least as far as the state budget is concerned, I think far outweighs some of the temporary difficulties we might have with the aesthetics on the south end, and I think we can pull together as a community to make our community as aesthetically beautiful, if not more beautiful, after this project's over.
You done?
Would you like me to go on stage?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
No. No instant things.
The question is, I'd like to hear about what's...
Yeah, I know that we have proposed street lighting that is, has a historical appearance, similar to, was it Maple Bluff? So if you drive through Maple Bluff and you're looking at the type of street lighting that they have there, we're proposing to do that. That would be, right now we just have LEDs on a wood pole. We're proposing to put up metal poles that are LEDs, but they are a little bit yellower than the bright blues. I'm not opposed to any type of conversations about what could go in the right-of-way and through the terrace, but there are always trade-offs. You plant shrubs in there, you have visibility problems. They take a lot more maintenance. They're not very salt resistant. So there's a likelihood that in a good snowy winter, all the shrubs that would be planted in there would die. If you plant flowers in there, you're going to want to plant annuals. That's going to take a lot of maintenance. We're going to have to hire a lot more staff to be able to do that. Personally, from my standpoint, the wider the tree lawn, the better. 4.5 feet is not, in my opinion, an advantage. But I understand not having money either. And the other trade-off is if we push the sidewalk back out that extra foot on each side, how many additional trees do we have to take out of people's yards? So everything kind of balances. I'm willing to sit down and have conversations about it, but there are so many different issues. Where does your water service come in? That'll be a huge issue on how we approach your house. Where does your sanitary sewer service come in? Where does your gas line come in? Do you need a sump pump connection in your yard? Those will all tie into ultimately what kind of final product is put in the street and what kind of things we can get to survive in the street. The street isn't really very friendly to a green environment. Even the trees require a lot of care and a lot of attention to what type are planted. I think we specify 6 types of trees that we allow, that we generally prefer to be planted in the right of way.
What size trees are you going to use?
Well, as you heard in the conversation, it depends on what kind of tree you pick. We're going to try we normally do 1.5 inches. We're looking to go up to 3, but that depends on the height because some trees can be 3-inch caliper and be 15 feet. Some trees are 3-inch caliper and are 50 feet. And that all changes the types of methods for installing trees. And we don't have that full capacity to be able to do some of those. So it depends on what type of tree. If you pick a really tall tree, it might be a smaller caliper. And if you pick a short tree, it might be a bigger caliper. Joe.
I agree with Randy said. This project, its logic, its inevitability, I think it will happen. I guess I will say it should happen. But in terms of the long-term sensibility of traffic patterns within the city, I would go home very happy tonight if I knew that the CP Avenue extension was not a dead issue.
For this project?
Well, not this project, but I mean, if that's over and done with, because my main concern remains truck traffic through the city.
Well, the long-term transportation plan has CP Avenue becoming part of G and A. And we actually, I don't know if you listened to the debate about the county highway overpass. We want to swing the county highway overpass so that it matches up with what's Owen Street now, which would eventually be CP Avenue. We plan on having CP Avenue have a curve at the Wisco and then run all the way down south and connect up with County Highway G, and then swing County Highway A across the south side and tie into CP Avenue down near the St. Paul's Church. And then that traffic would all run north and up to the north side of the city through that route, which would probably catch a lot more truck traffic than it does now. The city does not.
What's the time frame?
The city does. Yeah, that's the city does not go out and do those types of things unless there's something driving it, like a development or a need for additional industrial park or commercial activity. It's a functioning dairy farm right now. And to go in and start condemning property is probably, you know, I don't want to take someone's livelihood away from them in that situation when you're cutting that area up into 3 different roadways. So those are issues that, you know, are going to drive that. If, let's say there's something occurs and they decide to sell the farm for development, then that could move real fast. Or it could stay in a dairy farm for another 100 years. Okay. As far as the city has done, we've planned to take care of the issue on 89, but what drives it is a whole different issue.
Question on access for emergency service during the actual construction.
No, that's a good question. So, primarily yesterday, when the roads all tore up and something happens, an emergency, paramedics, police, fire, how do they get to your house, right? Actually, we're still discussing that with the city. We met actually last week going through the fire, with the fire department there and city administrator going through. What we're planning to do for most of it is leave at least a drivable pathway for the fire department's trucks to get around where our workway is. We're still working out whether that's feasible or not. I mean, especially the areas where we're going to be deep. We got to dig a 25-foot deep trench. All that dirt's got to get put somewhere, and so we have the roadway there. We think we can get it through there. If not, we also want to talk with the fire chief, depending upon which direction they can come from. The key for us is trying to keep that Water Street open for them to get around. For some of the side streets, if they have to maybe come around the back, it may add another minute or two, but it's a little more acceptable for when we're in an area where it's just, well, we have all this equipment right here, and it happened right here at the worst possible time. The fire department can still get around to where you're going to be at. As Brandon was saying, we're going to try and, this was Strand, about trying to keep the water lines open as much as possible. You can see in the drawings here, the water lines actually get moved over, so it's not being put back in the same spot. So that should help out the fire department too, in keeping those water mains and hydrants actually running as much as possible during construction, so that way they can hook right up. I know I talked to the fire chief, and they said that if they're within, they can get within the truck within about 200 feet of the fire, so they probably have enough line to actually fight that fire adequately where they're at. It's when that water main goes down is a big, big issue for them. So that's one of the priorities. We don't have all the details worked out for every single property yet, but we have set up quarterly meetings with the city to go over that with the fire department and police, and how we're going to do that for each section stage as we get more detailed into it.
And we have discussed EMS and those types of issues, and the police department always responds with the EMS. So generally they can get up, if the equipment for the contractor can get up to the site, generally they have a lane there that the emergency vehicles can get to the property, and then it's being able to get in and out, or being able to connect up to a fire hydrant, those types of things. But generally, I think he said before, we're at the 50-yard line maybe. We have a ways to go before we have all those details kind of worked out.
And Todd also reminded me that we'll have a construction project manager and a construction engineer on site. They will have weekly meetings with the city officials, the police, and the fire department. So every week, the emergency personnel will know what's going on and what's happening, so that they'll know for that week how to get around.
I was going to mention in relationship to that, we will hire a person whose sole job is to walk up and down the street and talk to people.
My question kind of goes to the detour area for the businesses. On the interstate, will the road be closed to Lake Mills, say, other communities they've had when they've done constructions on the main road have had Lake Mills blocked off? How are we going to make sure that traffic still is able to get to our businesses? I really like the idea that we're doing our downtown businesses in a stage one and that they will be open for business the sooner the better. But how do we make sure, through signage and whatnot and stuff, how are we going to make sure that people know Lake Mills is still available for business?
Yes. Actually, the question was, how do we make sure that from the interstate, people know that Lake Mills is still open for business? And I actually have a plan showing that, because I knew that it was an issue, but we had so many other things to talk about tonight. We will cover the signs that say STH 89 South, because those will be detoured. We will not cover any signs that say Lake Mills exit here. We will add signs that say, I think, access open to local businesses and things like that. So we do have to cover the ones that actually say 89, because we do not want trucks getting off to go through. So it's kind of a...
I think, can I finish up? We talked, and they will be able to get down to Madison and Main Street, and then what kind of signage we use to get them into the parking lots on both sides of Main Street, on Lake Street here, or on Water Street here, and on Church Street. Will get people better access to those businesses, and then having walking opportunities on the street will be a huge benefit. So we've been coordinating that, and you've been working with me on that too, as Katie.
Yeah, you had a question?
Yeah, piggybacking on the Churchill's question, the autos comment. I don't think you're going to convince me that the traffic in front of our house is going to be any better. I think there's going to be more traffic. I think it's going to be faster. I don't like the whole idea. But that's progress, fine. And we don't live underground, so all that stuff that's going on underground, great. We live above ground. So what I hear Kathy and a lot of my neighbors talk about is, you show all these nice engineering pictures, and I'm a scientist, it's like, it looks great, but you show nothing what we're actually going to see. You know, nothing about the lighting, nothing about the trees. And that's really what's important to us. It's the look of our residential area. So, you know, as salesmen, I give you a C+, you gotta do a better job at that, okay? But what I'm more concerned about than the traffic and then all that other stuff is, I have 2 young children, one goes to high school, one goes to middle school, they walk. Like postmen, winter, summer, spring, every school day. What's the pedestrian traffic gonna look like when you have all these sidewalks ripped up? You showed some orange netting. What are we going to do? So, and it's not just my children. If anybody who lives on that street in the morning, there's a lot of pedestrian young kids. They walk to elementary school, middle school, high school. And so, could you comment on that? Steve, maybe that's a question for you? I don't know.
I think that's a Jeremy question, but I'll tell you what we normally do. You tear out one side and put the sidewalk in, and then you tear out the other side, and you try and make sure that there are opportunities for them to use one sidewalk or the other and then get across the street. We are putting in rapid reflective beacons crossings at the high school. I don't think we've determined whether we're going to do it at East Lake Park Place or Catlin yet, but we are going to put in a crossing similar to what we have at the middle school.
So I think the big question is access during construction. How do you get around? Because we're going end of one school year to beginning of the other one and going into them. So what we're going to have the contractor do is, for the most part, while we're tearing in and having the road actually tore up through there, the goal is to have the contractor leave the sidewalk, the existing sidewalks in, and not touch those and rip those out yet. So have them get the road built back up until we get the sidewalks in. Once we have the sidewalks in, then we'll be probably flip-flopping like Steve has, where we do one side then the other, but the road will be back up. Other thing too is not just the children, but the people trying to get to their homes. They're not always gonna be able to park right in front of their house or get access to their driveways at all times. And when we're digging up, when we're doing that sanitary and water, and we gotta put the dirt there, it's probably gonna be in front of someone's driveway at some point. Now, we're looking at a couple days here, not the entire summer long, but it's going to be kind of coming in waves. Here's the sanitary sewer coming through, and then you get access. Well, now the water line's coming through. All right, well, once that's gone, now you can get back to your driveway while they're on the other sides here. Well, then storm sewer coming through. Then, so you have access to them, but then we're going to have our aggregate and base materials coming up, so equipment going through. It's going to kind of be in between. And the issue is you're not going to be able to park right at your driveway necessarily all the time, and you're going to have to, even the residents are going to have to access the sidewalk to be parked either ahead or a little bit behind where the active work area is. So that's the
People
goal.
parking on side streets. If I start parking on Phillips Lane, for instance, you know, those people might rightfully start complaining that there's a bunch of cars parked on there. What's going to happen with that? I mean, that's convenient for a lot of us who downtown's a long ways and going down the other to the south of town is a long ways.
Yeah, and that's one of the, we're at the 50-yard line, and we have to figure out with the city, A, is that allowed for parking? Is that going to cause issues? Is it against ordinances? Is the police going to have problems there? Is, when you guys are parking both on that side of that street, I guess the street isn't that wide, how much room is there for a fire truck to get down there? Is there two-lane traffic? We haven't looked at that specifically yet. So we're just saying whether or not we send everyone to the side street, or maybe we have them further down the road or coming up from behind on the grade. So let's say they're down past Phillips Lane, there may be some room available coming in behind.
Chief of police, I tell you, town and country days, those side streets, a lot of people park on that. What I'm telling you, it's going to be worse than town and country days because all of us on Main Street are going to be parking on the streets. It's going to be 3 months of parking.
Right now.
You know what, I think what we can say here is none of us are going to stand up here and claim that this is going to be hassle-free the year of construction. It's not. There will be some inconvenience, but we will do whatever we can to make it as least painful as we can. You know, we're doing things today much different than we did when I started my career, that's for sure. In Beaver Dam, we had temporary ADA accessible crosswalks in the construction zone. That's unheard of 10 years ago. So we do things like that. The other thing I will tell you, they cost money, and I'm being honest, and that's taxpayer dollars, and it's that balance on what we can do within some reason. It's a $5 million project. We could, if we did no accommodations, we probably could build this thing for $4. I don't know what the number would be. Definitely cheaper than $5. If we wanted to make it as, you know, totally free of any, it's impossible. I mean, it's part of our modern society. You turn the faucet on, you have water, right? You flush the toilet, hopefully it goes down. It's amazing, but, you know, in 3/4 of the world, they don't have that, you know, every day. And so what we're doing here today is, and we have state engineers, we did a project in Beaver Dam last year, much like your downtown, very much like that. And we showed some pedestrian accommodations. What we're going to do in this community in Lake Mills is much the same. Next year, we're going to be in Waupun, downtown Waupun, Highway 49. So we, you know, this is what we do for a living, but we're not going to lie to you. And if you think if we stand up here for a half an hour, you're going to get me to say you'll have hassle-free construction, I mean, I'd be lying. Anybody up here that say that would be lying. So what we're trying to do is mitigate as best we can. There is going to be some convenience. We're going to need help from local officials and local city to, you know, maybe there's some areas we can open up for parking and work through. But, you know, those are things we want to work for. And honestly, from you guys, if you have ideas, you know, for sure, talk to Jeremy or Vicky, and we'll try to incorporate those into our project for sure. So, oh, and then one more thing too. I had a question asked from the back of the room. They asked me to ask the question, and I'll have Jeremy answer it or Vicky. But the question was, again, going back to the trees, and we have parking on the project as well. If we remove the parking, would that lessen the impact to some of the trees? And
Yeah. General answer, yes. I don't know how many offhand. I mean, we have the tree inventory. You'd have to look at each tree where it's at. Obviously, the trees that are right next to the sidewalk, that's not going to help. But the trees that are kind of right behind the curb right now, you could leave them, but you're still dealing with the stuff coming through with the laterals, cutting roots to put in the laterals for the sanitary connections, water connections going across there. If there's gas needs to be moved and redone too. Would it lessen it? Yes. Enough to where these trees are not really going to be impacted? I honestly don't know for certain. I don't know many arborists. Maybe the arborists can comment that to a certain extent.
We could do an analysis.
Yeah.
It would
I think that Rob did go through and do quite a bit of analysis, and a large percentage of the trees are ash, which we are taking out already, had planned on taking out anyways, and that he estimated somewhere around 50% of the trees needed to be removed anyways. So you're looking at, okay, what trees aren't impacted by some part of the construction? You're getting down to a pretty small number of trees that might be saved for a lot of analysis and cost. So it was something that we have looked at. It's not outside the realm of what we would look at. The parking question, we've already had conversations about the fact that, and one thing I will guarantee is Town and Country Parade will not come down that portion of South Main Street in 2018. The other one is that the other one is that all those streets do allow parking on both sides and do have adequate width. Right now it's first come, first serve. If the people who live on the street get to the council and they get the ordinance changed to say that fares can't park there, then you may have a problem. The issue that we dealt with was that when my street was reconstructed, you'd be surprised. Most days you can get to your driveway and park in your yard. So the vast majority of people aren't going to have to be parking on the side streets. The biggest thing probably that we had to deal with that was odd was the mailboxes. Our mailboxes ended up on a street way down at the other end, and we had to go down and get our mail down at the end of the street. They wouldn't deliver on our street. Nick?
I guess my question maybe for Jeremy and Vicki was I hear some good accommodations being made for the high schools and whatnot in the area, but I guess my one question goes back to just south of town. We've got an elementary school with 250 kids that can't walk or bike to school. Is there a reason this project stops less than a quarter mile short of providing a safe route for them to be able to access their school?
Yeah, kind of the big thing is how we do the projects. This project kind of ends at similar limits. It also ties in with the city. The city, we have a connecting highway agreement with the city. So part of the issue is the previous projects, the one from 1962, ended just south of the curve there. So we're meeting in with another piece of roadway that's been done, I think, in 80s, early 90s, I'm trying to remember, last time there. So when we fund it, we go through and we try and fix certain points to redo. As we mentioned before, we don't have a lot of money, so we're looking at, well, this section here has been done since 1960. This was touched up to 1980. This roadway still has another good 15, 20 years of life on it. Maybe we're not going to spend the money to upgrade it since we're right here. We're going to focus on the money for just this project. It's kind of limits. Extending the sidewalk or even just the roadway replacement down there, the other issue comes in between where the urban section ends with curb and gutter and sidewalk and terraces, and then you get to the rural section where you have the ditches to take care of running water. Then we have more of a decision of whether we turn that into an urban section the whole way with the city, whether we leave it rural. If we leave it rural, then we have the issue with trying to keep the sidewalk. How close do we keep it? How much of a ditch can we get between the sidewalk and the road? Maybe we got to move the sidewalk further out. With that case, then we're buying more property from there, which greatly increases the cost as well. So a lot of it's just, here's a logical drop-off point for it, and adding on just solely, primarily for the sidewalk when the road is good, didn't really make fiscal sense for the programmers in here. I know it's not probably the best answer, but it was a logical cutoff point for us for the actual funding of the project here. And the additional gain we'd get by redoing this additional project isn't worth the money. There's a lot of other roads that are in much worse shape that need that Highway 3R funding more than this section, that little extra section.
I had a question just so you guys could explain, two of the contentious parts of the project are the 2 bike lanes in the road and the 5-foot wide sidewalks. Can you please explain for everybody why those 2 are requirements in this project?
The question he asked was the contentious portions of the project about why are the bike lanes being required as part of this roadway project, and also why are the sidewalks being increased in width to 5 feet. The first one for the bike lanes. This project is funded with quite a bit of money from the Federal Highway, the FHWA, Federal Highway Administration. Part of the requirements for this route, because it is a very main route, it's considered part of the National Highway System. The federal government has their pots of money and requirements for their projects, same with the state here, we were explaining earlier. One of the requirements for any roadway project, especially when we do a reconstruct on a national highway system, in order to maintain that funding for eligible funding, is we need to look at pedestrian and bike accommodations. And if they can be readily put in and there's not physical constraints to not put them in, they're required to be put in, or that federal funding is at jeopardy. And the feds can and have rescinded their funding for those projects when people not want to put them in. As far as the bike lanes, what we have been able to reduce and save 1 foot, so it could be a 5 foot and a 4 foot. Well, it's not much comfort, but that's part of the requirement for this. As far as sidewalks, I know with the state budget, they recently rescinded the Trans 75 requirements for all projects. However, the federal requirements for sidewalks and 5 foot sidewalk widths, since once again, this is a national highway project, are still in effect. And we'd have to go through the federal highway, and we could, again, put the federal funding in jeopardy by trying to not have ADA required sidewalks. Now, technically, they don't have to be 5 feet for the whole way. However, we would have to put in bump outs with a 4 foot sidewalk that is allowed underneath the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think every 200 feet, we have to put in a bump out, a widened sidewalk for passing if we had the 4 foot sidewalk. So you would see these little wide bump outs every so often down there throughout your project, which sometimes isn't aesthetically pleasing, and even with a 4 foot sidewalk, sometimes it, sorry.
I can tell you in my career, I don't know any 5 foot, anything less than 5 foot I've ever put in or seen put in. So it's pretty much a standard. Snow removal equipment, if you own a snowboard and try to hit it on a 4 foot walk, it's good luck. Or walking side by side with somebody down the sidewalk. So I've never put in less than a 5 foot sidewalk in my career. It's pretty much a national ADA standard.
Diane again. I have just a couple things that I wanted to mention. First of all, please remember you have 5 council people. I am one of 5. Is Steve still here? Kirkevich? He was here earlier. He was here. Remember that we are elected to serve you and we listen to you, but if you don't talk to us, we can't hear you. I want to compliment our citizens that are concerned about the beauty of the South End. Let me guarantee you that all 5 of us on the council care about the beauty of the South End. Doesn't mean that we can't do something different. I think what Randy was saying is very applicable in this case. One of the things I'd like to say to all of you, as you travel around the state, the country, Europe for that matter, if you see something, take a picture of what you see as far as what they did with their street. Just because we've done it one way for the last 150, 200 years doesn't mean we have to do it the same way. There might be other things that we could do that will make the city as beautiful, as notable, that we don't even know about. So keep your eyes and ears open. Give me a call if you found something. I've already done that once this year where somebody told me about it and I drove up to the Green Bay area to look at it and we discussed it. So please call me. I'm in the phone book. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I think the key word here is community. The comments about people not being happy that they're parking on their street. I'm sorry, this is a community project. So if somebody's being a pain in the you-know-what, and they're giving you a hard time, give me a call. I'll go over and talk to them about how we need everybody to pull together on this. We need everybody to support our businesses downtown when they're in this crisis situation. It's going to be hard on them. So you might decide to buy something here that you would normally go somewhere else to buy because you want to keep that business going. The same with the neighbors. Be kind and gentle with people, not mean and angry. They didn't make this happen. So let's work together. Lake Mills has a good history of being a working together town. Let's keep it that way.
Any other, oh, yep, back.
If the construction goes late into the department hours, does the city make exceptions for people who don't have access to their driveways or parking on the street overnight?
We'll make sure that if the
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question was, if right now the project, from the timeline is going into November for parts of the project here. And the question was, would the city make exceptions, the project's getting in later into the year and people don't have access to their driveways, would the city make an exception to the winter parking rules of no parking on the street? Correct? Okay. Part of the things we're looking at for November is getting the pavement complete. If it's snowing on here, we'll be able to get you access to your driveways here. The stuff that we're looking at not having, that maybe issues getting done, a big thing is getting grass back in and seed. Obviously, no, once it gets cold, it doesn't germinate, so, but you don't want to be planting grass when you're trying to pave curb and gutter and sidewalk and everything that's getting ripped up anyway. So the goal is trying to get done early enough in the fall to get seed down. If we do run into issues and the project does start getting long, we may end up having to come back in the spring and redo the grass seed or sodding back in the spring then. But as far as the driveways, we would maintain keeping that driveways on there. If we have to put in, we may, if we can't get the concrete in or something else, we might have to create a temporary driveway apron to get up into your homes. And the idea is that you're not going to be locked out of your house over the winter during the snow. It's just that we may have to come back if things really, really start backing up. If we have a really heavy monsoon summer and it just rains and rains, we'll look at that as it kind of comes. But we'll make accommodations to make people, especially before winter, we'll open up the project where it's at least usable. Any other questions, comments?
When the sanitary sewer is replaced, especially for businesses, we have the option to change the size of the sewer coming in? Okay.
Yes.
At no cost?
On the city's side.
On the other, up to the right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The question was, when the sanitary sewer gets put in, if, especially for like businesses, if there would be an option to change the size of that pipe, at least feeding up into the business property, correct? Okay. And then Steve's answer was yes, it will. And
yes.
No additional cost, yep, okay.
Yes?
What will the construction hours be? Typical?
Right now, we're trying to see if we can get it done through the typical working hours the city has. 7 a.m. or 7:30?
Yeah, we allow them to start at 7 and run until 7.
7 to 7? Yeah, so we're right now working with that kind of a work hour day to see if we can get work done. We know how many quantities we have, kind of an assumption. We basically have, I guess, data from other products on how much quantity of work a contractor on average can get done per day. How many cubic yards of concrete can they pour? How many tons of gravel can they lay down in a day? And we're working on trying to fit that in. And the plan is to get it done within that 7 to 7 and only one Monday to Friday and not work Saturdays.
So before and after those hours, do we have access to driveways or no?
It depends on what we're doing right there. The plan is to yes. The plan is at least to not, we're not going to have, and say like from Veterans to Phillips Lane with a giant 20-foot trench up there and just sitting there for a month. The goal is as they're laying pipe to be backfilling and stuff here, but it may take a couple of days here or there. But it shouldn't be like, oh, it's a month that you just can't get in. But it is going to be interrupted quite a bit, and that's where, like we were discussing before, about having those meetings, weekly meetings where we have with our construction people, and then getting communication to the owners. All right, here, this week we're going to be working here. We're going to be doing these operations between these areas here is going to be key. So if you guys feel you have inputs on good ways or how you need to be contacted, or whether you guys would like to see meetings or just website updates, let us know, give us those ideas. Appreciate any feedback on the best way to communicate to the actual residents on what we need to do for how we're constructing that project during that summer. Yes?
This is just a comment, not a question, but I am excited about the added bonus of the historic districts. I think that's going to be good for our community.
Yeah, the comment was about being kind of excited about the added bonus for the historic districts potentially being nominated here inside the city. Anyone else?
council has already passed putting in extra special lighting on the South Main Street to make it look more historic. We're going to add our own money to what they will pay. They will pay for regular lighting. The council's already made a commitment to up that and pay more money to get aesthetically lovely things. So that's one thing we've already done, and that will be coming. It isn't the only thing we're doing, but we are doing that, so we'll do something where it looks better than it would otherwise.
Thank you. Anyone else?
New trees are planted in our lawn to, will the city provide to ensure that they grow and survive with the actual planting, or once they're in our yard, they are responsible?
No, actually, they're a city tree. You give us an easement to maintain city trees on your property. So the trees that are planted there will be maintained by Rob's department. And he will, if they die, he'll replace them.
Yeah, just repeat that question.
Rob will, not me.
The question was about the trees that were planned to be planted back on the actual property, the private property, if that's the responsible of the property owner once it's planted, that's their issue to deal with, and then it's kind of what it's going to be an easement and the city's responsibility to maintain those, even though it's on the private homeowner's property. Any more? And we'll be around if you have some specific questions here a little bit too, so.
Thanks very much for coming.
You're welcome.